peeps, welcome to another video. Today is another of the mini tutorials where I talk you through the tips and tricks that I used in making this shirt dress, which is the McCall's 6696. Today I'm going to be talking you through how to attach the collar stand and collar, and it is a different method that the pattern suggests, and I first found this on the blog 4 Square Walls, which I will link her post down below because it's how I learnt how to do this technique. I thought I would make this video because I find videos very useful, especially with photos. You get a photo of one thing, you get a photo of a second thing, and I like to see the bit that happens in between of how that got to then be that, which is why I like the videos. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how to attach a collar and collar stand to the neckline of shirt dress in my case, and there are a few tips and tricks that I have for you. So the first one is, if the collar and collar stand piece are identical, the first thing that you want to do is mark a line 1/8 of an inch away from the outer and upper edge. So this edge of the collar stand is what's going to get sewn into the neckline of the shirt, and then this curved edge is where I'm removing 1/8 of an inch. And then with the collar, the same thing. I've drawn it on with friction marker so you guys can see I've not chopped it off yet, but this is the outer edge of the collar, and this is the line, this is the part of the collar that's going to get attached to the collar stand. So you want to remove 1/8 of an inch from around the top edge of both the collar and the collar stand pieces, and that's just to help everything roll under and sit nicely when you sew everything together. The second thing that you want to do is you want to cut out your interfacing, and then you want to remove the interfacing from the seam allowance. So this is the 5/8 of an inch stitching line that I have here. So I have drawn again around the top edge of the interfacing and the top outer edge of the collar. I have drawn on the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, so I'm going to cut that off as well. Okay, so I've chopped off the seam allowance from the interfacing of the collar stand and collar, and then I've chopped that 1/8 of an inch away from the top edge of the collar stand and from the outside edges of the collar. So I'm going to go and interface these, and obviously you want to center this so that you have the even seam allowance the whole way around for both of these pieces. I've stay stitched my neckline the whole way around, and the first thing that we want to do is attach the interfaced collar to the neckline, and we're going to match up our notches. So there's a notch there and there's a notch there, so we're going to match those up. You're going to end up with this little bit of the collar stand protruding over the edge of the button placket. So again, I'm going to pin mine and I'll show you as I go. You may need to clip to your stay stitching line to get this collar to lie flat enough to pin into the collar stand evenly. Lots of pins, lots of clips, but we've got everything lying nice and flat. So I'm going to sew that at 5/8 of an inch, and as I mentioned, the seam allowance is hanging over the edge of the button placket. So like I say, 5/8 of an inch the whole way across. Be careful, I like to sew with the placket down and the shirt facing up underneath the needle, because if anything's going to pucker, it's going to be something along here, so I want to be able to maneuver the fabric so I don't get any puckers. Once you have sewn on the collar stand, you want to press all of the seam allowance up into the collar stand, and I'm going to trim to the line of stay stitching all the way around here. And I personally like to leave myself quite a lot of seam allowance to work with at this point, because I can find if you trim it too close, it can become quite fiddly when you're trying to top stitch the under collar stand on. So I'm going to trim all of this away. Okay, so the next step is to pin the under collar to the outer collar. So the outer collar is the interfaced one, and we are going to have to kind of stretch the under collar because we've chopped off 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So it is doable, just lots of pins and kind of you'll end up with this one bowing a bit, but once we turn everything around, that will just mean that the under collar will naturally roll to the underneath, so you won't be able to see it. So what we want to do, I'm going to sew from this side because I have a seam guide here, so I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch all the way around. Now when I get to the corners, I like to reduce my stitch length around here, sew up to the corner, and I actually take a couple of diagonal stitches across the corner rather than pivoting on the point, and then sew along to about here, increase my stitch length, and repeat on the other corner. So I'm going to show you once I've done it, but I just wanted to let you know that that's how I sew these particular corners, and I find it helps get nice points. So you can see here what I was talking about. So that's my normal stitch length, reduced it to 1.5, couple of stitches on the diagonal, and then short stitch length, and then back to the normal stitch length, and I repeated that on the other corner. So we now need to trim all of this seam allowance away, and you need to trim quite close to and diagonally across the points so that you can turn them through with no bulk. All the excess is trimmed away, so I'm now going to turn this through and then I'm going to press it. And because the under collar is smaller than the outer collar, then in theory the under collar should roll under. We shall see. Pressed everything and I have nice pointy points, and if you look at the underside you can see that the outer collar has kind of rolled over and that the inner collar is lying nice and flat. So I'm actually top stitching all of the details on my shirt dress, so if you would like to top stitch, now's the time to do it, and I'll be doing it the whole way around. And for top stitching I use my blind hem foot because it has a nice guide on it that I can run up against the edge of my collar. My needle moved all the way over to the left, I get a nice, it's more edge stitching than top stitching. Let's have a look. Yeah, see, like this. But it's I love this foot, and it gives me a nice straight line rather than trying to do it by myself or by eye. Top stitching is done, so the next thing that we're going to do is pin our collar to the collar stand that is attached to the shirt dress or the shirt. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are pinning the under collar to the collar stand. I think I've got that right. I'm going to pin mine and I'm going to show you. Okay, so I have pinned the collar to the collar stand that we have sewn onto the garment already, and I've got the interfaced or outer collar piece facing up, and I have the under collar, the uninterfaced piece, facing the collar stand that is attached to the garment. So your top stitching you should have the pretty side of your top stitching facing you, and you should have the under collar, so the smaller collar which has got the outer collar showing, facing the garment. Now I've pinned that all the way across. Now the next thing you want to do, you can either baste this into place, or you can attach the outer collar stand, so the uninterfaced collar stand. Now the first thing you want to do is press up your seam allowance by 5/8 of an inch, and that is on the straight edge, so the uncurved bit. So I've pressed that up, and then the next thing that I want to do is pin that in place the whole way along, and we're going to sew it in at 5/8 of an inch. Now this one, again, we have taken 1/8 of an inch off of the top edge, the stitching line, so you will need to stretch it slightly to pin it into place. I like to find the middle and then pin the ends in, pin the middle in, and then stretch it from there so it's got an even amount of stretch over the entire piece. The under collar is now sewn in, and the collar itself is sandwiched between that and the under collar that is attached to the garment. So the next thing that we need to do is trim off all of the seam allowance along here. Now again, don't trim too much from this particular part here, because I just find it easier with a bit more to work with when we turn everything under to top stitch it down. If there is, as I say, a bit more to work with, you can find it very fiddly if you trim it away too closely. But this one here, you want to reduce it to around about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to do that now. Seam allowances are all trimmed, so the next thing you want to do is turn everything out and give it a good press. Once you've pressed everything, you then want to either slip stitch, or for me, I'm going to top stitch because I'm top stitching everything, so I want it to all blend in. So I'm going to top stitch my collar stand to the garment, the inner collar stand, and I actually am going to, again, you can stitch from the right side of the garment, but I'm going to stitch from the wrong side because I'm not intending to ever wear this dress completely buttoned up to the neck, so this is always going to be on show and open, so I would like the top stitching on this part to be the nicest and the most precise. If you're planning on making your garment to be worn buttoned up right to the collar, you may wish to top stitch from the outside, so that, again, because that will be the most prominent part that will be shown the most often. Hope that made sense. Once you've top stitched or slip stitched your collar stand into place, your collar is complete. So I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section down below and I will do my best to answer them for you. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!